Tao Meeting Archives, October 11th, 2015. Dealing with Death by Bill Bunting.
What say we go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual? 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位顶传是一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。
Good morning or afternoon or evening or whatever time it is, wherever you may be, and welcome to another installment of the Sunday Online Tao Study Group. It's a gorgeous fall day here in Indianapolis. It's nice and cool outside and sunny. The leaves starting to turn and it's getting really pretty outside. It's a wonderful day to be involved in this process together. Today, I'm going to deal with perhaps one of the more difficult topics in cultivation for most people, which is dealing with death. And the reason that I'm dealing with this now is because one of my best friends in the entire whole world has lost his mother. She passed last week, and because this gentleman is one of my best friends in the whole world, I'm trying to do what I can to make his life a little easier, to help where I can. And having someone close to us pass, or someone who's close to one of our friends or family members pass, always presents some challenges in terms of providing support and understanding and help for those folks. And so part of the reason I'm doing this is specifically for my friend, and because it bears repeating from time to time, so that we can remember that even in life's more difficult situations, the Tao teachings still provide us with a way to live skillfully and effectively, and to deal with those difficult situations with a certain amount of agility and appropriateness. It's important to remember that the Tao teachings primarily deal with living life skillfully, with the tips and teachings and wisdom to help us get through our typical day with a minimum of stress and conflict and contention, and to keep our lives going as smoothly as possible. And because of that, many of the teachings don't deal with death and dying head on, that is our own demise or the demise of those that are close to us, but it often deals with it in a somewhat more oblique fashion. But that being said, the Tao teachings on how to live life skillfully also provide us with the keys for how to deal with the passing of those we love and our own eventual death. I'm 57 years old now, and most of the people that I know are about my age, or a couple of years younger, or a couple of years older. I'm at that age where parents, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, most of my relatives, and a lot of the people that I know either are getting to the point where they're going to be going through their end of life, or where the folks that we know mutually are starting to pass. It's kind of a natural thing. I remember when I was much younger, 6, 7 years old, the same sort of event occurred, as the older members of my parents' and grandparents' generation reached the age where they started to pass in some numbers. It was kind of a large scale family die-off, if you will, which isn't a delicate term, but it is the truth. And that's beginning to happen again, only now it's my generation, the folks that I know, the folks that are a little older than I am. And that causes me to think about my own mortality from time to time. And it causes me to think about that mortality in terms of following the Tao teachings in particular. And there are things that we can derive from those teachings that help us in those times. The truth of the matter is that as we age, not just myself, but all of us, we're all going to face those time periods where the people that we know and love are going to begin to pass before us, and eventually we're going to have to face that day on our own. And so teachings provide us with the ability to learn to value life appropriately and live it well. And perhaps equally as important, though not as often discussed, not to fear the end of our lives when it comes. The teachings also give us the ability to provide some fairly unique help and assistance to others when they're facing death, whether it's from a relative or a friend or someone they knew well, or their own, because we have perhaps a more unique and practical sort of an approach to the end of life events than some other paths in spiritual pursuits. Now, I have to say, we're going to talk about this as being the natural way of things, but the very topic of death and dying is one that brings up an awful lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, a lot of discussions about faith and spirituality, and those discussions very quickly become quite personally intimate, and sometimes easily charged with emotions and feelings that are difficult for some folks to control, and with belief systems and values that are very closely held. It can't be our goal or desire to persuade or change somebody else's mind or get them to accept something that they don't believe or haven't been exposed to when they're in the midst of going through what's already an emotionally traumatic process, or where they're just trying to get through the day. But we'll cover how to do that here in a couple of moments. It's important for us to bear in mind what the truth really is. The truth is that everything that lives dies one day. Everything. It's something that we can observe just by looking out the front door. We have a couple of dogs as pets, and one of them is getting quite old, and so one of these days we know that that dog is going to die. It's not something that we look forward to. It's going to be really hard on my kids and tough on my wife. It's not going to be easy for me, but it's going to happen nonetheless. And so at least having that practical understanding of the process that's at work is somewhat helpful. I try to bear in mind and help others to bear in mind that death is simply nature's way of renewing itself and repeating itself. Death is a part of living, and whether we want or not, everything that lives one day has to pass. But in cultivating the Tao teachings, at least in my own case, and I suppose I should preface this with, this is my opinion and belief here. But in my case anyway, cultivating the Tao teachings provides me an awful lot of freedom from the fear of dying. Mostly because there's not a concept in the Tao teaching, some kind of eternal punishment or eternal glory. There's not an expectation of judgment or persecution. There simply is the natural progression of living to the end of life. And then whatever occurs after that, presumably also following a natural path. As I came to understand those concepts, those teachings deeply, that is, as they became more integrated into my being than simply intellectually understood, I had an epiphany one day that literally was most freeing. I felt a weight come off my mind, if you will. I've said before that at one point in my life when I was much younger, I was kind of on my way to the Southern Baptist Seminary to become a Southern Baptist preacher. And so I grew up with the concepts of hellfire and brimstone and the eternal glorification and wonderful, beautiful life of an eternal heaven. I also grew up with the understanding that despite my best efforts, I could never live up to the standards that my salvation supposedly called for. And that caused me a lot of grief and stress and tension. It's one of the overwhelming reasons why I started seeking a better, different set of answers. Because I knew what I was supposed to do. I knew what I was supposed to become going down that Southern Baptist path. But I just plain couldn't ever get there, and nobody could tell me why or what to do differently. And so I carried with me for a number of years the fervent belief that no matter what I did, I was going to burn in eternal hell. That's not a comforting, fun thought, and it certainly didn't do anything to advance my spirituality, but it kept me up nights. The more that I came to think about that, the more I realized that there had to be a deeper truth, that there had to be something that made sense, something that reconciled the human life to the human spirituality and to the way that we really are, the way that things really work. And the Tao teachings provided me with that set of answers. And so upon having that epiphany, if you will, the anxiety about spending time in all eternity in an everlasting hell evaporated. I can be perfectly okay with the concept of karma and the concept of reincarnation and the concept of accountability for my own actions and my own deeds. Those things don't really bother me. But spending an eternity in hell through no mechanism that I was able to control bothered me a lot. Perhaps in understanding the Tao teachings, you all can achieve that same absence of fear. And so how is it that we go about reconciling the natural process to our Tao spirituality for those of you who are walking down the spiritual path as I do? Please understand you don't have to. This simply is my thoughts on how that works. That notwithstanding, we know death is a natural thing. We understand that karma is also a natural thing. Reincarnation, if it in fact occurs, is also a natural thing. And I don't have a problem with accepting, in particular, dying and karma. They're readily observable natural processes that spring out of the activities of our lives. We're born, by definition, the day we're born, we're going to die. It's natural, it's normal, it's unavoidable at some point. It simply is the way nature works. While we're alive, karma is going to attach to us for everything that we do, positive and negative both. And in this context, I'm not speaking about karma as some kind of ethereal next lifetime judgment. I'm speaking about karma in the context in which it really works, which is the rather relatively immediate consequences of our actions, both positive and negative. I don't know, and I'm not going to speculate whether or not positive or negative karma has an effect on how we reincarnate if we do. I'm perfectly content to just deal with what I have to deal with in the here and now. I don't have a problem with reincarnation because I can accept the supposition that there is a part of my being that mirrors the Tao itself, something that is beyond explanation and beyond description, that transcends death. We call it the true self or the Buddha nature. Call it the soul or the spirit, whatever term works for you. We're all intrinsically aware of that part of us that we really can't put our finger on or explain, but we know is there just the same. That is almost exactly the same view we have of the Tao. Whether you call it the Tao or heaven or God or whatever, it defies measurement, explanation, quantification, qualification, or any other attempt at analysis and understanding other than to describe the attributes that we can observe that come from it. And so for me, all of those concepts, death, karma, and reincarnation, rest on the natural processes that are at work in the universe right now. I see birth, life, death, and rebirth as a natural and necessary cycle. A cycle that brings that part of us that transcends the death event back around to learn the lessons we haven't learned yet. And hopefully, for us, one day, that cycle of birth and death and rebirth becomes enlightenment so that the cycle can stop. Where do we go after enlightenment occurs? Who knows? I'm not sure where that is. I'm not sure where I'm going to wind up when this lifetime ends. And what we're talking about there is a matter of faith. It's a matter of belief. But there is enough evidence in the real world, in the day-to-day existence, in the way that the Tao teachings work, that I can infer from that the process itself also works. And I'm not afraid that process includes some kind of ethereal judgment mechanism that brings us into an eternity of either glorification or punishment, either one. I think that concept violates the common sense practical approach of the Tao teachings in a way that makes it irreconcilable. So what does all of that have to do with my friend and dealing with death and dying? Well, every now and again, especially as we get older, people are gonna die around us. It's gonna happen. Sometimes it's going to happen in the most unexpected of circumstances, and it's going to be a huge shock to everybody. And it's going to cause a lot of trauma and a lot of upheaval and a lot of emotions and a lot of stress. And it'd be kind of nice if some of the folks involved in that situation could become the voice of calm and reason and compassion and support, because whomever the bereaved is going to be in a state of pretty fragile emotions. It's been my experience that the only time we see an awful lot of people is either at weddings or at funerals. And at funerals, everybody lines up and they all say the same doggone thing, which is, if you need anything at all, give us a call. That statement has become the funeral platitude for generations. People say it and don't mean it, and if you called them, wouldn't have any idea what to do for you. That is not helpful. And so I do my best, and am doing my best right now, to provide some kind of practical, down-to-earth, real-world assistance that's actually beneficial. And in so doing, I put my feet firmly on the teachings that I know work and believe, not so that I can try to get the other person to believe them or accept them or utilize them, but so that I can utilize compassion and understanding and giving to bring some comfort and some peace to the other person, make their lives a little easier, and get them what they really need in whatever fashion that may present itself. I don't put a lot of expectations or constraints upon the nature of any encounter. I try to listen and understand and do what the other person needs me to do. In this particular case, with my friend here, he needs to know that I'm here, but he also needs for me to not be in the middle of his life right now. Okay, I can do that. Not a problem. If for some reason all of a sudden he needs for me to be present to do something or take care of something or just to be there for him, I can do that too. And the importance of understanding what the real need is critical if we're going to lend support. I don't want my friend to feel like he has to entertain me while he's grieving the loss of his mother. I just want him to understand that if he does need me, I really will show up, as opposed to the couple hundred people who lined up to tell him, if you need anything, call us, who don't mean it. I've been on both sides of that conversation. I know how it works. It is in the teachings of a well and skillfully lived that we learn to compassionately and sincerely help others when they are embroiled in times of emotional upheaval and stress. And there is no period of emotional upheaval and stress more challenging than the death of a child or a parent. We have to utilize the Tao of giving perhaps in its highest calling in times like this for other people. Because we have to figure out what they need when they themselves may not necessarily know. And we have to be able to do that without putting undue pressure on them. It means getting as much information as we can as possible without being intrusive or invasive. It means being present as we're needed, but not intrusive to the point of becoming a nuisance. And that balancing act isn't always easy to achieve. But once again, because Lao-Tzu speaks to us about how to live, we can understand perhaps a little better about how to help. The other part of this discussion that we absolutely cannot go around is facing our own death one day. You know, we know one of these days we're going to have a lot fewer days in front of us than we have behind us. And we're going to have to deal with everything that our own passing means. I can only speak for myself right now. And please understand once again, you know, my thoughts, my opinions, you can accept or reject whatever I say. No problem. But for me, understanding the Tao teachings and facing death appropriately means taking the burden that I can take off of my wife and family and making my passing as easy for them as it can be. I tell my wife is to simply have me cremated and sprinkle me on the vegetable garden. She's almost slapped me a couple of times for that one. But the truth of the matter is, I want for them to get, 15 minutes of grief and then get on about the business of living. It probably isn't going to happen that way, but time has a way of making that pain and that grief better. And eventually, the emotional pain of loss is supplanted by the wonderful memories of life together, and the passing becomes somewhat more tolerable. I absolutely understand that statement at a very, very personal level, and I know it to be the truth. I know because I'm trying my very best to live the Tao teachings to the best of my understanding that I'm not going to need to be terribly worried about my karma. My decisions may not always have been right and correct, but they were always the best I knew how at the time. And I think in terms of karma, why we do what we do is as important as what we do. I know that when I face my own demise, I'll be able to face that without fear, because I have an understanding of the way things really work, an understanding of the nature of things, an understanding that my life has to end at some point in time, along with many others, or eventually we're going to fill the planet up with old people, and there won't be any room for anybody new. We're already kind of doing that as it is. And equally, gee, I'd love to go in my sleep from a massive heart attack. That may or may not happen. If it's some kind of a protracted illness, I understand at one point that death event is going to be an end to physical suffering and pain. And I'm kind of pain averse to begin with. I don't really like to hurt a lot. So that's not necessarily a bad wrinkle. Understand that I wouldn't do anything to hasten my own demise by so much as a second. I love my life. I love my family. I love my kids. In 57 years, I've gotten to do wonderful things, and I've enjoyed tremendous blessings. And I wouldn't give any of that up, intentionally any sooner than I had to. But I'm not going to delude myself that I'm going to live forever either. It took me a long time to admit I wasn't 18 anymore. That delusion I wanted to carry around with me forever. Unfortunately, as your body ages, that delusion tends to fall apart. and it did. But now that I'm absent that delusion, I've gotten rid of a lot of the rest of them too. Even in an educational or discussion forum, sort of a platform, death and dying is a tough subject. It's hard to be delicate about. It's something that people don't like to discuss, but it's going to happen. So we ought to talk about it now and again. Dealing with death and dying is one of the most difficult and emotionally charged encounters we ever face. It truly is. And when we face it for someone else, when we're trying to extend help and assistance and comfort, then it's really difficult. And so, what I say there is with compassion and understanding that we can help make things maybe a little easier for the living, kind of by anticipating what they need and helping where we can. Perhaps maybe by doing that we can make their lives a little easier during a really difficult time. And as I say nearly every week, by applying the Tao teachings, particularly in these really tough situations, perhaps we can not only help someone else, but mitigate some of our own fears and anxieties. Maybe we can learn a little something else about our own human nature, our own way of doing things, and find a lesson or two for our own spiritual refinement and growth in there. Thank you all very much for letting me share with you. And to my friend, my heart and my thoughts are with you. Thank you, guys.
The biggest point that I want to make about the topic of death is that I know whenever you talk about this, Bill, that there are pseudo-intellectuals who will say that, who will disagree with you and say that the Tao doesn't talk about the hereafter. They're actually wrong. They're actually basing their disagreement with what you have said today on a very superficial understanding of the Tao. Has anyone ever brought that up? Okay, excellent.
From time to time, yeah.
So just to set the record straight for people who are listening, while it is true that the Tao Te Ching itself does not go into the hereafter, the topic is very well known to the ancient Tao sages at the time of Lao Tzu, before him and after him. So, for example, when people say that, well, Bill should not be talking about karma or the wheel of life and death and rebirth called samsara or reincarnation, because those are Buddhist concepts, I would actually disagree with their disagreement. This is because the concept of specific terms like karma and samsara, absolutely, yes, it is correct to say that these terms did not exist in ancient China at the time of Lao Tzu. But it's not the words that's the important thing here. The concept that these terms are based on, samsara, the circle of life, death, and rebirth, that maps exactly to the Tao concept of circles and cycles, which definitely existed at the time of Lao Tzu. The concept of karma, the verbiage, the term of karma, was unknown to Lao Tzu, but that doesn't matter. At the time of Lao Tzu, before him and after him, it was well established that there was a balance in nature, in heaven, and in human affairs. If you want to substitute balance, balance on the scales of justice for the term like karma, or vice versa, you are perfectly welcome to do so. Therefore, what Bill has said today is absolutely 100% correct, in accordance with the Tao and in accordance with the Buddha. Furthermore, just let me do a shameless plug, because I want to set the record straight. I have devoted an entire section of 5 chapters in the new book coming out in November on the topic of death. This is because Zhuangzi has made numerous great points about death and the hereafter. For example, let me just throw one point out of many at everyone. Zhuangzi says that we all talk about this, oh, he lost his life. She lost her life. What a great loss. Zhuangzi says, think about it for 1 second. This life that you think that you have lost, or she has lost, or he has lost, this life never really belonged to you or that person to begin with. It was never yours as something that you get to keep permanently, eternally. This life that you have is something that is more like it's unknown to you, something that you can hold on to temporarily while you are around. At some point, like a library book, you have to return it. So you haven't really lost your life because originally you did not have it. You were given it, and one day it has to be given back. That's how it works. So numerous other great points that Zhuangzi made about death. So I'll leave the rest of it, and so as to not to take too much time, I'll leave those who are interested, the rest of it for those to get that book from Amazon and other booksellers. So that's my shameless plug here.
We're happy to have it.
Thank you, Bill. Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，持下三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持下各位点全是一鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。All done today, guys.
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http://taoism.net/tao/connect-online.